welcome back to another episode of the Chronicles of Gameology, where the concept of game is both a science and an art. Knowledge of the art is the science. Application of the art is the art. I am your host, Neil K. Marcellus, and yeah, that's checkmate. Results and outcomes upon this chessboard we call life, which can play into a man's favor or put him on the receiving end of a big fat zero. But either outcomes, both positive ones and negative ones, is never an accident. This is why a wise decision will always have the freedom of multiple options. So successful outcomes and conclusions in life is directly related to a man's ability to choose from multiple courses of action that can lead to a positive payoff. In view of what I just stated, a man who is a practitioner of this philosophy, referred to as the concept of game, has within his repertoire two kinds of aces that he can always utilize in his intimate interactions when it comes to the females and the ladies. Because he knows what the lion cannot manage to do, the fox can. With that being the case, a man has two avenues, with each avenue possessing multiple off-ramps where he can explore different routes. But these two avenues, which applies to his intimate dealings and relations surrounding the male and female relationship dynamic, one of these intimate dealings pivots around the concept of attraction, which allows him to experience the sweet pleasure of a woman's sexual nature. And the second kind pivots around the concept of connection, which allows him to experience the pleasure of a woman's soul. So on this episode of the Chronicles of Gameology, we will explore the nuts and bolts that makes up the two massive avenues that I just got through mentioning. Also, why a lot of men struggle with the concept of attraction. And don't even get me started on the concept surrounding the other avenue I just mentioned, which is the notion that deals with the idea of connection. Man, but I get to all of this here momentarily. Firstly, let me clarify and make bluntly transparent that the concept behind the way of the lion and the way of the fox are not mutually exclusive, meaning that they are not isolated and contained in their respective corners, never to intermingle or associate. Better yet, look at it like this. Get a load of this image I'm now showing you. Undoubtedly, you are well familiar with this image, which is commonly recognized as the yin and yang symbol. In this image, you notice that there is a small black circle inside the white portion of this yin and yang symbol. And by the same token, there is a small white circle inside the black portion of this same symbol. This speaks to the power of being versatile. Basically, the power of versatility, which is the two small circles embedded inside the large configuration of the overall yin and yang symbol, guarantees that the strength of the lion will always have the assistance and access to the skill set of the cunning and cleverness of the fox, and vice versa. Therefore, a man is not just pigeonholed by being a lion only, and a man is just not pigeonholed by being a fox as well. They work in tandem and conjunction with one another. Now, as for the concept of attraction, from a gameologist and a street perspective, there are multiple categories that encompasses how a man and woman can become attracted and are drawn to one another. Unlike the square version, which is a one-size-fits-all worldview commonly pushed by the dating coaches and the pickup artist community. But the street perspective, as it comes to the concept of attraction, has multiple varieties, covering different scenarios and circumstances that a man will encounter on his maneuvering to and fro and across this chessboard we call life. Get a load of this new image I'm now showing you. As I said, from a gameologist and street perspective, there are multiple forms of attraction that a practitioner of this street philosophy can utilize and make use of. So for instance, As this image is indicating, one form of magnetism a practitioner can use is the complement method. And by the way, the term magnetism can interchangeably be used to signify the overall concept of attraction. Now, this complement form, it pivots around the compatibility of strengths and challenges that a man and a woman would have in common. And this other form of magnetism that's also on this image, it pivots around the compatibility of a man's and a woman's ethos and norms, highlighted and brought to the surface during the wooing phase of getting to know one another. However, the form of attraction that a lot of men struggle with and carries a greater liability in causing the most anxiety for men is the form of magnetism labeled from a street perspective as the I'm doing me form of attraction. Check out this new image I'm now showing. And oh, one more thing about this form of magnetism that I just got through mentioning. It pivots around the concept of interdependence instead of independence. Just to get that straight and make sure we are all on the same page. But in order for this form of attraction to work in a man's favor, he must be able to distinguish his prowess and cut himself from the herd, and all the while entice and invite a woman's affirmative juices to reposition themselves and start flowing and being directed in his direction. Those who are frequent viewers of the Chronicles of Gameology already know this, but I use the tenets and the principles of chess and draw correlations and show how this applies to this discipline commonly referred to as the concept of game. And so, in order to hold your weight as a thorough chess player, just like a top-notch winning NFL coach that has a complete understanding of the players he instructs and sends out onto the gridiron in the football field, this same quality of insight that a coach has about his players must be known by a thorough chess player about the 6 iconic chess pieces making up the game of chess, which is the king, the queen, the bishop, the knight, and the rook, as well as the pawn. Just like there are 6 essential chess pieces that makes up the game of chess, there are 6 essential and powerful attributes that makes up this version of attraction, which is I'm doing me form of magnetism. Like I already stated, this form of attraction is all about making a man more attractive in the eyes of the ladies and supercharging his persona so he can better utilize this form of attraction. In the first place, the number 6 and its significance when it comes to the game of chess has to do with managing 6 points of vagueness when a chess player decides to move and advance their chess piece. Removing vagueness is all about having clarity in 6 directions. Number 1, when moving a chess piece, it's all about having clarity on what could be a possible counter by your opponent. Number 2 is all about having clarity on what might be exposed once that particular chess piece is moved from its initial position, what's behind it. Number 3 and number 4 is all about how does a chess move influence negatively or positively what's to the right and to the left of that particular chess piece. That's 3 and 4. Points 5 and 6. For one to be a top-notch chess player, by all means, there cannot be any vagueness whether a move is a plus or minus, as in scoring or the points that will be lost or gained in advancing that particular chess move from its current position. So, the significance of those 6 points of clarity I just went over and explained carries over into the I'm doing me form of attraction that I'm currently speaking about. But once these 6 attributes are cultivated from within for a practitioner, it magnifies the efficiency of how that practitioner can utilize this version of attraction. One of these 6 influential principles, I have already did an episode breaking down its fundamentals. Here's the link. Check it out once you get finished viewing this episode. And the principle that I just referenced and have shared the link to, which is a necessity, by the way, for an individual or a practitioner to utilize this version of attraction that I'm currently speaking of, is the concept of power. Still yet, let me explain and highlight from a gameologist and a street perspective the two greatest stumbling blocks that prevents a man from utilizing this version of attraction. And of course, this first stumbling block is when a man is devoid and is empty in all or several of those 6 influential attributes I just got through alluding to. The one that I gave the link to where in the previous episode I explained, like I said, is the concept of power. But the other 5, in order to give them justice, would take 5 individual type shows just to explain each one individually. But the other stumbling block number 2 that keeps a man from utilizing this version of attraction is this liability that overshadows a man's awareness and his fact-checking capabilities, which occur because of an overabundance of vagueness. I just explained the concept how it applies to one's maneuvering their chess pieces successfully. You can overlap that explanation that I just gave onto how a lot of men get caught up into a lot of bullshit when dealing with certain females, especially a female who has a win-lose mentality. Meaning, when she is interacting with certain men, she is in the business of making that man lose in order for her to win. There's a common understanding in the streets, spoken exclusively among practitioners of this discipline when viewing the social dynamic and society overall, and that is the keen understanding that reality is classified, meaning there is an overly abundance of vagueness and obscurity that has been thrown over the social dynamic. Therefore, reality for a large percentage of individuals is classified. For this reason, all practitioners of this street philosophy make it their business to always stay on top and take it upon themselves to be consistent in tightening their game. And this requires a practitioner to forever and for always to cultivate, amplify, and fine-tune this tightening process, which reaches a pinnacle where it then emerges into a Jedi-type mental capability, referred from a street perspective as the ability to peep game. Peeping game as a trade craft within this discipline is in all actuality the practice of critical thinking. Check out this fresh image I'm now showing. To pair and to re-emphasize those 2 major stumbling blocks that impedes a man from utilizing this version of magnetism, referred to as I'm doing me form of attraction. So, once again, number 1 stumbling block is the lack of establishing those 6 influential attributes that enhances a man's profile, so this form of attraction will work in his favor. And the second stumbling block is when a man doesn't even realize that he is on the outside gazing in, being unable to call balls and strikes, sift and sort through non-factual information, because reality for the one who finds themselves being impeded by this second stumbling block has been classified. Therefore, the Jedi-type mental capability referred to from a street perspective as the ability to peep game requires a man to sift and sort through non-factual, useless information, and then make a executive decision that positions him to reap the benefits and the rewards of that verdict. Zeroing in on this image, when a man encounters this particular stumbling block, which is the inability to peep game, it is a result from him being unable to think through the backwash and shockwave tumbling downhill towards his way from a problem or a decision. And as a result, this is where negative consequences or unfavorable outcomes will pay this man a visit. And let me state this for the record. This ability to peep game is not only used to better a man's position at getting at the ladies, but peeping game is a skill set that is used in every facet of a practitioner's life. Anytime you hear the term game used exclusively to imply its use is strictly meant to better a man's position at strictly getting at the ladies, then you know that the individual who verbalized such game goofiness is a Johnny-come-lately, a square, who has co-opted the term and has never been put on and initiated, where they become a graduate who is no longer restricted on being on the front porch. Getting back to this image, for all intents and purposes, peeping game is how a practitioner of this street craft sift and sort through information at various degrees and stages of importance when making heads and tails of the numerous situations and conditions presented for scrutiny when maneuvering across this chessboard we call life. As you can see, this has 4 stages to it. Let's deal with the first stage on this image, which is assumptions. From a street perspective, the concept of assumptions is something that an individual takes for granted. Usually it's something that the individual has accumulated from past experience and do not heavily question. Basically, it's part of their worldview. This is not a big issue because assumptions can be justified or unjustified, depending upon whether the individual who holds these assumptions has good reasons for them being in their repertoire. Look at it like this. An individual hears a commotion at the door, and then that individual gets up and goes to the door and opens it and lets their hyper pit bull puppy come in. Now, this individual's reasons for just opening the door was based upon the assumption that only their puppy makes such a ruckus and a disturbance when the puppy that is ready to come back in. As you can see, one's assumptions finds firm footing and validation when one's assumptions is directly tied to one's experience. Moving on to stage 2, which is possibility, let me paint this picture as to what constitutes possibility from a gameologist and a street perspective. So for example, every time an individual gets into their car, one possible outcome is that the individual may get into a fender bender. So when a practitioner is peeping game and evaluating circumstances and situations based upon possibility, then the practitioner in their sifting and sorting must be predicated on the potentiality and the likelihood of what the practitioner is evaluating. Does it have the wherewithal and follow through to totally manifest? Man, if I had $1 for every mishap and setback that has occurred because individuals failed miserably to evaluate the possibility or potentiality of a situation before it went south, boy, I'd be sitting on a nice chunk of change. Moving on to stage 3, which is probability. Once again, let me paint this picture as to what constitutes probability. Continue with the car analogy that I use in stage 2. Let's say an individual chunks down too many drinks at their local bar and grill and makes the boneheaded decision to get into their car and drive at a high rate of speed on a busy highway. Then one probable outcome is that this individual would get into an accident. And so when a practitioner is in the business of peeping game and evaluating circumstances and situations based on probability, then a practitioner sifting and sorting must be predicated on the odds, the constants, and variables falling and leaning towards the practitioner's expectation. Not to geek out and get into some heavy statistics, but check out this image I'm now showing. Probability can be conceptualized as a spectrum of proportionality that can range from the number 0 to the number 1, as this image is demonstrating. This is why a practitioner needs to learn how to play poker, because this is one of the ways to learn to get up to speed on how to peep out different degrees of probability. Lastly, stage 4, which is one's ability to peep game and pinpoint what is definite. And since I'm on a roll as for disclosing the ins and outs of how this 4-stage process worked using this car scheme, painting the picture as to what constitutes the respective stages of how this concept of peeping game truly operates, I'm going to stick with it. Therefore, on this 4th and final stage, which is what constitutes what is definite, this can be illustrated once again by supposing that an individual who has been heavily drinking and is driving fast on a busy highway, and then all of a sudden their brakes go out. Talking about having a bad day. On top of this, a car in front of them immediately comes to a complete stop. Then, a unescapable outcome is that they will definitely end up in a car wreck. Now, this is a colorful and dramatic illustration which embodies what stage 4 of this process of peeping game considers definite and bound to happen. And so a practitioner at this stage needs to be able to sift and sort to the degree that what is being evaluated is a foregone conclusion, which is an outcome, a end result regarding an open and shut and a no-brainer. As a consequence, in order to accomplish this level of forecasting and hitting the nail on the head, you know what? Better yet, Wesley Snipes in his movie Blade said it best on how to accurately predict a foregone conclusion, which encompasses stage 4 of the process of peeping game. So check this out.
When you understand the nature of a thing, you know what it's capable of.
Man, there it is. Short, sweet, and to the point. Boy, that segment never gets old. But what he said is exactly what it takes in order to forecast a foregone conclusion, which is what's definite and bound to happen. You see, when it comes to the application of peeping game at stage 4, that takes you off the casualty list by the way of becoming an individual whose reality or where reality is classified. But the application of peeping game at level 4 of this process, it requires 3 concise ingredients, which is the means by which one goes about acquiring true knowledge. Ingredient number 1, observational logic of the nature of a thing, person, or situation, which was the exact point Wesley Snipes so profoundly stated in that clip you just got through watching. Ingredient number 2, reflection. And ingredient number 3, trial and error. So observational logic collects the facts, reflection combines them, and trial and error verifies the results of that combination. Once more, like I stated at the beginning of this podcast, what the lion cannot manage to do, the fox can, which speaks to the need to have the knack and the qualifications allowing a practitioner to operate in different methodologies and styles. In particular, when the time calls for a practitioner to throw their bid into the mix as it pertains to the exciting back and forth that takes place within the male and female relationship dynamic, which for a man with options is either the avenue of attraction or the avenue of the soul, which the second one operates by facilitating a fertile ground by which then a unshakable deep connection is established and firmly arranged. I didn't even get a chance to divulge more of the secrets surrounding this particular avenue I'm speaking of, which is the concept that deals with connecting with a woman's soul. I will have to do a totally different separate episode on this category of the male and female relationship dynamic. To conclude, I divulge one of the main stumbling blocks that sideswipes a man's chances at successfully using one of the most sought out versions of attraction, which from a street perspective is the I'm doing me version of magnetism. But don't get it twisted, I have barely scratched the surface on the subject of attraction and the total explanation on how one goes about peeping game. But when a man doesn't have the know-how on removing these stumbling blocks I share it with you, then he will conjure up a long list of excuses, all based upon his unresolved fears. So from a gameologist and a street perspective, and getting back to the power of an educated decision, fear, from a street perspective, has 2 meanings. Number 1, it stands for forget everything and run, or number 2, face everything and rise. The choice is yours. Now, that's checkmate. Thanks for watching. We'll definitely catch you on the next episode.